Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Tom Rivera, and welcome to our oral history project. Today is November the 7th, and we are at the Fowle Library at Cal State San Bernardino. And our interview session will be conducted by Mr. Frank Acosta, who is part of our committee. And Frank, you'll be interviewing me. And like I mentioned, I'm Dr. Tom Rivera. I retired from Cal State 3 years ago, and my official title now is Emeritus Associate Dean. So Frank, if we can get started with the interview?
Sure. We can start with your grandparents.
Papa Sisto and Mama Vitor are from Mexico, and they came to this country in the early or the late 1900s.
Do you know what part of Mexico?
They both came from the northern part of Jalisco, the little town called, Grandpa was from Santa Maria de Los Angeles, and Grandma was from Colotlan, Jalisco. And the little towns are about 50 miles close to Zacatecas. Grandma came here in 1897, and then Grandpa followed in 1899, and they both came to Los Angeles via the Southern Pacific Railroad. The husband of my grandmother was recruited to work for the railroad, and then my grandpa was recruited afterwards. But being in Los Angeles for 5 years or so, they got together, and Grandma had two kids, my Aunt Frances and my uncle Agustin. They got together, they came to Colton, and they came to Colton in 1905. That was a time when they were opening up the Pacific Fruit Express plant where they would manufacture and make ice for the boxcars that were transporting fruits and vegetables from Southern California and the low desert to all parts of California, all parts of the United States. And like I said, they came to Colton. When they arrived in Colton in 1905, they settled and lived in the workers' section house, which was located on the south side of Valley Boulevard, I Street, and at the end of Mount Vernon Boulevard. So they were there for several years. And then they moved close to the plant, about 2 blocks away from the plant, because the plant was located on M Street, and they moved to O Street where they bought a little property. And they were there. As a matter of fact, the property still belongs to the family.
And what's the address there?
427 East O Street, and my brother lives in the property now.
Now that area where the section house is all part of the freeway now, so that's gone.
Yes, and that's completely gone, Frank. It's like everything else. We've had a lot of changes over the last several years, but they lived there for several years before they bought their property on O Street.
All right. And where did your grandfather work? At the...
He worked at the PFE, the Pacific Fruit Express, and he was there when they first opened the plant in 1905.
What kind of work did he do there?
He was a laborer.
Okay.
At that point, during all those years, Frank, the early years, Mexicans could not rise above the position of laborer. They were laborers forever and ever. So they came in as laborers, hired as laborers, and they retired as laborers. And my grandpa retired as a laborer in 1959 when they closed the plant.
Did your grandmother work at all?
Not at all. She was a homemaker, and she took care of the family. We had, like I mentioned, she had 4 boys that were born in Colton. My uncle Cruz, who got killed in 1935. My uncle Isidro, who followed. And then my dad, Ruperto Rivera, he was born in 1919. And then my uncle Nacho, who was the youngest of the family.
No daughters?
No daughters. The only, my grandma and grandpa You know, in the old days, Frank, we had that custom of adopting the youngest daughter of one of the relatives. So anyway, Anne Francis had a daughter, Margaret, and she was given to my grandparents so that she would take care of my grandparents and be with my grandparents. And she was, I guess, their only daughter that they had, Margaret, and she was raised by grandma and grandpa.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned that the community was a segregated community.
Mhm.
Do you want to explain a little bit of that?
The
You use the phrase surrounded by gringos and downtown Colton.
the our community of Colton was divided into two areas, and then the dividing line was the Southern Pacific Railroad. On the north end, we had the Gringo community, and these are the folks that were instrumental in building Colton and establishing the business that we had in Colton, and they were the ones that were very much able to get the railroad in Colton and develop from the railroad. And these were the people that were the movers and shakers of the community.
Many of them were growers, fruit growers.
Well, we had, as you know, Southern California in the 1860s started the citrus industry. And then the citrus industry covered most of Southern California from Pasadena all the way east to Redlands, and then from our San Bernardino all the way to Orange County, completely citrus. And we were the #1 citrus growing area in all the world. And we shipped a lot of oranges out of the area. For example, when my grandpa was working at the PFE, they would manufacture ice to go in the boxcars, so the boxcars would have that temperature where the vegetables and fruit would not spoil. And it's estimated that in the 1920s, 1925 or so, they were able to ship 500 boxcars of oranges throughout the entire United States and all over the world. So it was a pretty active business that we had in the citrus industry. And the citrus industry also, Frank, like I mentioned, my grandfather came in because Southern Pacific came to Colton. But the citrus industry also brought a lot of Mexicans from Mexico during the latter part of the 1800s. And many of them landed, first of all, in Highland, East Highland, the little community of East Highland. And from East Highland, they had relatives there, they had jobs there picking oranges, and from there they moved to San Bernardino, and then many of them moved to Colton, like the Padilla family and the Sanchez family from that Highland area moved, and the Castorenas moved to Colton.
Now, did your grandparents then come directly to Colton, or did they go to East Highlands and then over to Colton?
Oh, like I mentioned, the citrus workers came from Mexico to Highland. That was citrus. But the Southern Pacific people either came directly from Mexico to a specific area. And, you know, El Paso was the place where everybody came to, first of all, and then they branched over to Kansas City, Chicago, and many of those places where the railroad needed workers. So Grandpa came to Los Angeles, and from Los Angeles transferred to Colton.
Okay. Now, your grandfather, aside from being a family man and working at the PFE, was he also involved in the community in other ways?
Very little. My grandfather was kind of a very traditional kind of Mexican, you know, very serious, and didn't get too much involved with the community. But he belonged to the union, he belonged to the Progresistas, and he belonged to the Trabajadores Unidos. And the Trabajadores Unidos had their headquarters at the Portland cement plant, because we had a lot of Mexicans also that came from Mexico to work at the cement plant. And the cement plant started their business in 1890. So we had a lot of workers that worked in the cement plant. So we had those three businesses: the cement plant, which occupied many laborers. We had the PFE that also occupied many laborers, and we had the citrus industry that also occupied many of our people.
And then the third, well, the fourth area that provided employment was the railroad itself.
Well, that's Southern Pacific.
Okay.
That's Southern Pacific
Right.
people, yeah. Yeah, so, and then we had the agriculture. You know, the agriculture, which was a coolie ranch. Grandpa Mejia came from Aguascalientes, Mexico, and then he lived in Chamberino, New Mexico, and then from Chamberino in 1921, 22, came to Colton, and he was an agricultural worker, so he worked with the coolie ranch people. And what other areas that they had that raised crops, he worked for them.
Now, you mentioned the circus.
Oh, my grandpa, like I said, a very traditionalist, but he loved the circus. He loved the circus. So every year, the circus, I can't remember what the name of the Mexican circus that came to town, but it's from Los Angeles.
The one that I'm familiar with is Vargas.
Could be that one, but it was a Mexican circus that came to town every year, and Grandpa would take us to the circus. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot-
Where did you go to, where did they set up the circus?
In South Colton someplace, Frank, but I can't remember. I was a little guy. I was a little, maybe 4 or 5 years old, so I can't remember. But I do remember the circus. My grandpa, the only place that he took us was the circus, no other place. Maybe he took us grocery shopping because he didn't drive either. And he had a little bicycle that he would ride to work, or he would ride to the store. And in the handles of handlebars of the bicycle, he'd carry his little mochila, his little bag, and that's where he put his grocery stores. And again, I do remember that we lived about 4 blocks away from the grocery store, Rodriguez grocery store. He had an account there that he would purchase food, and they would put it on his bill, and then we would go home. But when we went with him, he would buy a soda, Frank.
Special treat.
He would buy a soda, and we never had sodas, so that was a special treat that he would provide for us. But the circus was also a wonderful treat for us. But he was very traditional, Frank. He kind of a no-nonsense kind of quiet person, and I remember my cousins, the daughters of my tia Pancha, Francis. Here's his firstborn. He had my grandmother's firstborn. She had 4 daughters: Ruth, Mary, Joe, and then they had given Margaret to my grandparents. So when Ruth, Mary, and Joe would come to the house, they would go over and kiss my grandfather's hand.
A very traditional greeting for someone that people in the barrio respected. They're usually reserved for grandparents and padrinos.
And I didn't know that. That was completely new for me. So they did that, Frank, and I thought it was strange for me. It was strange for me. And, even though he worked for the railroad, he had passes to go to Mexico and pass to go to his hometown. I remember he went once. He went once back to his hometown, and that was the last time that he came, that he went. And I remember he bringing those bags, colorful bags made out of hemp.
Yes.
And he brought one for my mom, and I do remember that. But he never went back to Mexico.
Mm.
Yeah. And Grandma was very traditional. Ta chiquita. She was tiny, maybe 4'11", 4'10", 4'11", and very Indian features that she had. But she was the opposite of my grandfather. She loved to sing. She loved to dance.
That's where you get that from.
Anyway, Grandma was, and then she loved to give people food and welcome them and give them coffee. And, she was just a wonderful person that enjoyed being with people. She was going blind in her latter years, in the late 40s and 50s. She was going blind. She was a diabetic. And I remember she would be watering the plants outside. And we lived in the back house. You know, grandparents live in the front house. And la casita de atrás,
Right.
you know, very Mexican traditional,
Right.
¿verdad?
Probably built with wood from the railroad cars.
It was built, well, you're absolutely right, it was built with wood from the railroad cars. And anyway, we were next door to them in the back, and we would come and, we're tiny, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And we would come and visit grandma. And she couldn't see well, and she was watering her plants. And then she could get us all wet. She couldn't see, so she get us all wet. And then, but that was kind of fun. The other thing that she liked to dance. She liked to sing and dance. We would gather at her kitchen, and the music. She would be listening to the radio, and then the music would play, and she liked the ta 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 ta, and yeah, and then she would grab us, and we would dance with her. We would dance with her in the kitchen, so she liked that. Entertainment, they had parties. They had parties, and then they would buy a calf, and they would invite all their friends and compadres, and then you know, my dad and my uncle Nacho, and they had a little garage, and in the little garage they would slaughter the calf, and then they would butcher the calf, and then they would prepare for the party that was going to take place that afternoon. And I remember these big cauldrons, Frank, big, huge cauldrons. They would put fire under those big cauldrons, and they would boil water. And then they would also get a whole bunch of chickens. And then they would, you know, strangle the chickens, twist their necks.
Did they grow? Did they have Did they have chickens there at the house, or?
We had chickens at the house, but they would buy chickens, more chickens for the party, and they would wring their neck, and then they would put them in hot water, and then pluck the feathers from the hot water. I mean, after the hot water, and then after they pluck the feathers, they would put them on top of the fire, so they would burn the little
Singe the remnants of the feathers.
Yes, and then from there they would put them back into another pot of hot water and make caldo out of the chicken, and then that caldo was used to make the mole. So we had the mole, and they had the beans, and had the rice, we had the tortillas, and then some of the compadres played the guitar.
You had to use some of that caldo for the rice too.
Exactly. And the compadres would play the guitars, and they would play, and then Grandpa didn't dance, eh? So there's Grandma dancing all, either by herself or with people in the.
And your grandma provided the tortillas?
The ladies came, and then they used her kitchen, and they made all those things that needed to be made the kitchen, the tortillas.
De mano.
De mano, yeah, tortillas de mano. Flour, they were flour tortillas, some corn tortillas, but most of them were flour tortillas. Yeah. So the Mexican traditions continue with my grandparents.
And about how long did your grandparents remain?
Oh, let's see. Grandma passed away in '58, and I had just graduated from high school that year. And then Grandpa passed away in '72 or so. So I was lucky that I had Grandma during all those years. And I do remember Grandma. She would babysit for us, Frank. And Mom and Dad did not allow us to have coffee. But Grandma was an alcahuete, and she would, in the morning, early in the morning, she'd get up, and her room was next to the kitchen. So we were in her bed, and my brother and I, and then she would get up early, and then she would bring us a little cup of coffee. That was really neat.
And did she make the coffee with more milk than
Yes,
water?
yes. So that was fun. That was good. Those good memories of my grandparents. we were lucky that we lived next to the, but again, La Casita de Atrás, Frank, you know, that was a little old house that didn't have indoor plumbing. We had an outhouse. We were connected to the sewer, but we had an outhouse. And it was just like you said before, it was made out of that wood that was for the boxcars that were taken apart. But it was a very, very, I had no idea it was not a good-looking house. Ta feita, but that was home until, throughout, until I was 18 years old.
Did you have a water tap on the property?
Yes, we did.
And an outdoor shower?
Didn't have, I don't remember the outdoor shower, but I know we bathed in the tubs.
Tinas?
In tinas.
Oh.
My mom, we had a small kitchen, and Mom would bring in the tina on Saturdays.
Heat up water?
She would heat up the water we had a little stove, an old stove, and she would heat up the water in the old stove and put it in the tinas, and then we'd take turns taking a bath. And that was Saturday night.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, the area where you grew up, you have very fond memories of that barrio.
I grew up in el barrio La Paloma.
And which is approximately what area?
It would be, it would be 8th Street, La Cadena, would be the west side of the barrio. And the east part would be up to 12th Street. The north part would be L Street, all the way to Congress Street. So it covered a good-sized area. And we were lucky because we had the park. We had the park, and we spent a lot of time at the park. They call it the Veterans Park now. At the park,
What was it called before it was Veterans Park? Was it
El
South?
Parque, just in South
But
Colton
was
Park.
it the South Park?
South Colton Park,
Okay.
the South Colton Park. We used to go to El Parque, and we used to, the kids that lived in the projects in that part of Congress Street, Pine and Congress Street.
And that was south of where you lived?
That was south of where I
South
lived.
of the park?
Yeah, south of the park, along Pine Street. The park bordered Pine Street, and then it went all the way to Congress Street. So we had a lot of kids in that area, and we would put together a baseball team, softball team, and we'd get together and play some of the kids from the 5th Street or La Reserva. They would come down to our park and play there.
Was there a ballpark in that area?
The Veterans Park, or the South Colton Park, did have a ballpark, and the ballpark was used extensively. It was built in 1939. The property was given to the city by the Colton Cement Plant, and the Colton Cement Plant provided the property with the stipulation that people from that area would build the park, would provide the watering system for the trees, and then would also plant the grass, and they would plant the trees. And the community came together in 1939 under the direction of Gabe Castorena. Gabe Castorena worked for Parks and Recreation for the city of Colton, and he was instrumental in bringing the community together to build that park. And that park was built there. And then he was also instrumental in forming the Mercury baseball team. And the Mercury used to play on the corner of La Cadena and N Street. There used to be a ballpark, and before that, there was the Garfield School Field, as you well know. But the Mercury's played there, and they Cape Castorena said, well, why don't we move to the South Colton Park? Because at South Colton Park, there's the diamond, and there's also lighting. So the Mercury's baseball team moved to the South Colton Park, and they had two teams. They had the softball team, and then they had the hardball team that played on Sundays. Yeah.
Now,
But
your team was able to use that facility?
Yes.
So it wasn't sandlot baseball then?
Well, in the barrio on O Street, our street was not paved. Okay, we didn't have curb, gutters, sidewalks. It was not paved. It was a dirt road. So, yeah, that's where we played, we started playing
On the street.
On the street. And then the other fun place was half a block from my house on N Street. There was a main thoroughfare for the city people to use that as at, the dump was located there. The city dump was located 2 blocks, or half a block away from my house.
At the end of O Street?
At the end of O Street. So that was fun too, because when the dump trucks came, maybe twice in the morning, 2 or 3 times in the morning, and we saw them come down O Street to go to the dump, everybody in the neighborhood rallied and followed those trucks, and they waited till they dumped their trash in the dump, and then we'd go through it. You know, reminded me of third world countries, but we'd go through it and select comic books and some toys and some things that we could use at the house. We would collect, old rags that were dumped away, that were dumped, so we can use us and sell it to the junk men on Saturdays. So that was a fun place. That was a great place to be with. And then the river was next to us, Frank. The river provided for us, the Santa Ana River and Idle Creek came together in that area. It provided a wonderful playground for us to play soldier and all kinds of shoot for, kind of our BB guns. We used our BB guns and we hunted lizards. And it was a great place to play soldier. We could build foxholes and go back and forth and use some of the branches that grew along the river as spears. So we would cut them and use them as spears. And then when I was a Boy Scout, we used to meet as Boy Scouts at Garfield Elementary School, and we would have weenie bakes in the summer at the river. And we would build a bonfire. We'd roast weenies and marshmallows and play Pigs Come Over the Hill, and so that was great fun. I got a little older, Frank, and I mentioned that we used to go hunting with our BB guns and shoot the lizards. And then we graduated 22s, Frank.
Oh.
We had 22s, Frank, and then we had a lot of cottontails in that area, lots of cottontails. So we would be hunting cottontails with our 22s and go all the way to the river, to the Santa Ana River, cross the Santa Ana, and then we had the Cooley Ranch. And the Cooley Ranch had alfalfa, had watermelons, had melons, and we were able to use that area to hunt for our cottontails. So, and then we crossed the Cooley Ranch and go up to Chap Hill, which was just not too far from the Cooley Ranch. And Chap Hill had a canal, and the canal was open canal. And
Was that the Gage Canal?
I don't know what it was, but it was a canal that the water was cool, just cool and wonderful. It ran through Grand Terrace, and we would swim there. We would swim, and there used to be a lot of orange grove, a lot of citrus grove. And then on either side of the canal, we used to have peaches that grew. We had apricots that grew, and then of course the oranges. So we had a wonderful time playing in that area.
Now, you did this with your friends. Can you tell me something about who some of your friends were?
Oh, my friends were just our neighborhood kids, we had the Castorenas. Mickey and Eddie were our age, so we used to play with them. And then next to the Castorenas, we had the Castros. In the Castro, we had Peter and Bobby and Mary Lou and Terry and Margaret, and they were also our playmates. And then after that, after the Castro house, we had the dump. And then over to the left, we had Arturo Colunga, his brother Manuel, and next to them were the Cisneros. We had Julie, and we had Dolores, and Jesse, and anyway, there was a large family. And then next to them, on N Street, we had the Campas, and Alfonso Campo was about 3, 4, 5 years ahead of us. And when he was in high school, he was a good athlete. He loved sports. Good athlete. He was on the track team at Colton High School, and he thought it'd be a good idea to organize the kids in the neighborhood and teach them everything about track.
Cool.
So here we were, Frank, we would run the 50-yard dash. He taught us how to run and then he'd bring a stopwatch. I don't know where he got the stopwatch. We used to run the 100-yard dash, and then we used to run the 300-yard dash, and then he taught us how to high jump, and he taught us how to broad jump, and, everything about being a track runner. And then, he also said, instead of having, the oval, he said, let's run around the block, and there'll be one lap. So we started on Nth Street, and then went over to 11th Street, and then went east on 12th Street, and then made a left turn on on O Street, and then made a left turn on 12th Street, and we wound up making that one lap, which was around the block.
Mm.
So we did that too. So it was great fun. It was
Now,
great fun.
Did that interest you in track and running?
Well, the other sports, it did because he was also a good football player. And I remember he talked about Glenn Davis, one of the one of the football players. And then, like I said, the dump was just next to us, so we'd find football shoes at the dump. Right? And then Alfonso would tell us, well, these are football shoes that I found at the dump, and these belong to Glenn Davis. Well, we were gullible enough to believe that was the case. So, Glenn Davis was one of our heroes back then. So again, Alfonso taught us. He used to organize it, and we played touch football. So we learned about the different positions, and we learned about plays. So anyway, he was a good mentor. He was a good mentor for us. And then also we played at night, Frank. Safe community. We used to play hide and seek at night with all the neighborhood kids. We'd go back and forth from one house to another, one property to another, and had a good time. And like we also played tops, los trompos, and we used to play that. We used to play canicas also, marbles. And we had our own favorite chudi that we used to use to be able to get more marbles from the other guys. So it was a great time. And then we made our own toys. The scooters made out of old skates that we used to take a 2x4 that would be the base for our foot, and then we'd take a box, a little lug, and that would be the face of our scooter, and then we'd put handles on them, and we used to do that. Lots of building bicycles from parts that we found at the dump. We used to build our own bicycles, and just be able to get the wagons that were discarded at the dump and bring them home and repair them and a little paint. So it was a great time with the kids in the neighborhood. And like I said, around the corner from our place, we would have more kids, and we'd form the baseball team that we needed. So wonderful time growing up in our neighborhood, Las Palomas.
Now, as you grew older, what kinds of activities did you get into, like as you entered high school and grew older?
I played football for Colton High School. I played B football, and we had a great team. We only lost one game that year by 1 point, 6-7. We missed the punt, and Poly High School beat us. So we had a great team, and then I played up to my second year. But after that, Frank, the guys were just too big for me. Didn't play junior varsity, or varsity was out of the question. The guys were just too big, and they hit hard, Frank. So I said, I ain't playing with these guys. But I did play softball. I did play baseball for Colton High School up until the end of my junior year, and we had a wonderful team. It was a great team, and that was a good experience too. A little basketball, but I played with the little guys the D and the C squads. Didn't play the JVs or the Bs or the varsity, but had a great time at Colton High School doing that.
No track?
I tried it, Frank, but it was not me. I tried cross country, but it was not me. The game was just a little too hard for me.
And where did your interest in rebote start?
It started there at the Veterans Park when I was a little guy. We had a handball court. We had two courts. One was for the pros, you know, the big guys that were pretty good at handball, and the other handball court was next to it. On the other side of it was for us that were the beginners, the little guys. So that's when I started handball, because the guys that played handball that were very good. And they were kind of our heroes. We wanted to be good handball players with them. And then the other one that gave the impetus to playing handball was the priest, Father Valencia, would come down to the handball court and play there, and we'd watch him play. And he was also very good. You know, he'd pick up his, I don't know what they call that black thing that they wear, what would you call it? His black, the dress. It's not a dress.
Cassock?
I don't know what it is, but he would pick it up and wrap it around his waist, and he'd played handball with us. The other thing is that Father Valencia would bring watermelons to the rebotes. So after the games, we would all eat watermelons with him. Yeah.
Well, what kind of social activities were you involved in high school?
The Boys Forum. I was a member of the Boys Forum. Mostly, they were sports activities, Frank, that we participated in. I wasn't too interested in some of the other activities because, again, getting back to, we talked about culture. And we talked about Grandpa being very Mexican and following the Mexican ways. And then remember that saying that was, no llore, los hombres no lloran. Remember that?
Right.
Right. So anyway, we were brought up with that type of mentality. So people that dance, you know, hombres no bailan, okay? Okay? Or people that sang, tampoco, los hombres no cantan. And people that played an instrument or a violin, menos, ¿sabes? Menos, no, guys don't do that.
Well, unless it's part of your family's culture.
It wasn't part of ours. It wasn't part of mine, so we didn't do that. And you know, my dad frowned on that. My grandpa frowned on that, so I didn't do those things.
No, you must have gone dancing, no?
Didn't know how to dance,
Oh.
Frank. You know, you don't dance because you go to parties, but you stand around. You don't dance. We had the garage parties, Frank.
Because you mentioned cruising and out-of-town dances and church jamaicas.
Well, I went to them as a spectator.
Okay.
As a spectator, because the church, you know, had those fundraisers, the Jamaicas, but we were spectators. And when we went out of town, I went with my neighbor, Eddie Castorena, and he would take me to the dances. I was 15, 16 years old. And I just went with Eddie. And Eddie was a good mambo dancer. Eh? And he wanted to teach me how to dance mambo, but it just didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. And some of the other things that along with playing the violin, you also didn't play tennis because that was not a he-man sport. You didn't play tennis, so or golf. You didn't golf either. What was that? It was a gringo sport, so we didn't participate in any of that, of those games.
Okay, well, getting back to schools, we skipped over junior high.
Oh, junior high school, Brown versus the Board of Education, the national legislation that came to fruition in 1953, where you integrate the schools. We had a junior high school that was all Mexican, Wilson Junior High School, and the gringos on the other side of the track had Roosevelt, which was their school. And in 53, they closed down. They didn't close down, but they moved us to the new junior high that was being built in North Colton on Valencia,
Colton Junior High.
Colton Junior High School, Valencia and Laurel. And, but it was not completed, the construction was not completed until 1954. But in the meantime, in 53, we went to school at Roosevelt. And that was a toughie, right, because there was not enough space. And I think we had 3 sessions of people coming in. You know, group one was, I guess, 7:30 or so, or 7 o'clock. Group 2 was at 8 o'clock, and group 3 was at 8:30. I can't remember what the schedule was, but we had 3 sessions, and that was tough. That was tough for everybody, and especially many of us that were disappointed that we were 8th graders at Wilson, and we were not going to be graduating from Wilson Junior High School. And then what we experienced, you know, we lived in a self-contained neighborhood. You know, South Colton was self-contained. The square area of South Colton was 1.3 miles. And it was a self-contained neighborhood where all of us were Mexican. And then we had our own businesses. We had our own grocery stores. We had our own church. We had our own schools. We had our own restaurants. We had our own gasoline stations. We had our own tortilleria. We were self-sustained. So well, everybody was the same. But when we moved to North Colton, very different, just very, very different, because it was a different culture. And then many of us had never experienced being with gringos at all. You know, so it was a tremendous, just a different.
Culture shock.
Complete cultural shock. And so anyway, at our school, we were the best students. At our school, at Wilson, we were the
Top athletes.
the top athletes. At our schools, we were in ASB, we ran the government, we were the presidents, the vice presidents, secretaries and treasurers. So pretty much, you know, we got that. And then at our school, if we had a play, we were the actors, we were the leading actors. So anyway, we got that experience of being able to be the leaders of our school. Now, when we moved to the new school, we were not the leaders. For example, playing a flag football, at our school, at Wilson School, we were the first stringers. At the new school, we were the bench warmers. And even it was true of all sports, basketball and everything, all the other sports. And even in the classroom, we were not the leaders in ASB. We were not participating. In our old school, we were the top students. In the new school, we were regulated to the beginning classes, or the dumb classes, you know, the remedial classes. We were in part of the school. So that experience, Frank, I think it was the worst academic school year that I've ever experienced. And then we moved to the new junior high school, Colton Junior High School in 54. Brand new school, beautiful school. But again, there was still that adjustment period where we haven't, none of us, the kids in Roosevelt and the kids from Wilson, hadn't adjusted to that situation. The teachers hadn't adjusted to that situation.
And you only had half a year there at that
Yeah.
school.
And then the community people, they hadn't adjusted to that situation. But we knew as people coming from South Colton that the kids from Roosevelt didn't want us there. We knew that the teachers didn't want us there.
Well, a lot of the teachers from Wilson transferred to Colton Junior High also.
But we had teachers from Roosevelt that we were taking classes in, and we knew that they didn't want us there. And then we knew that the community didn't want us there. Moms and dads from that area didn't want us there. So it was a hard academic year, Frank. Very, very difficult for me.
Now, did any of that continue in high school?
Well, in high school it was a little different because, you know, you had.
It had always been integrated.
Yes, yeah. And then we had kids that were in the 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th and 12th grade. And then the kids that were sophomores, juniors, and seniors, pretty well integrated to the school. So they served as role models as to, you know, being able to adjust at the elementary school. And then we had kids, I'm sorry, the high school. And then we had kids from Bloomington, Frank, that came to Colton High School. And they also had a tough time coming from Bloomington.
Well, that's
Colton
right,
High School.
Bloomington High School hadn't been built at that
Right,
time.
right.
So
But-
all the Bloomington kids had to graduate from Colton High School.
But at the, in trying out for football, you know, freshman football, oh, that was a wonderful experience because the coaches that we had, their only motivation was to win. And how do you win? Well, you get good ball players. So we were able to play and have a good team at our freshman team. And then we integrated not only Colton kids and South Colton kids, but also we integrated the Bloomington kids. I remember Ed Rollins was from Bloomington, big kid, fullback, and he was just a great football player. So anyway, we adjusted well to Colton High School.
Now, changing subjects, you grew up at a time when two wars affected South Colton very
Mhm,
heavily.
mhm.
It affected the whole country, but what was the impact on South Colton?
It was well, first of all, the kids or the young men that went into World War II were born in the late 20s or the early 30s. And many of them did not graduate from high school. Many of them were drafted before they were able to graduate from high school. So we had a lot of our kids that were males that were born in the 30s that participated in World War II as soldiers. They were taken out of the barrio, Frank. They were taken out of the barrio. They were sent to training camps throughout the country, and at those training camps, they got 3 square meals. They got shoes. They got uniform. They got clothing, and they also got training in different vocations. So they got that training, and after they went through basic training, then they were sent to different bases, not only in the country but also overseas. So when they went overseas, Frank, they met kids from all over the U.S. So they became aware of something other than Colton, South Colton, and they became friends, and they were introduced to not only different people from different parts of our United States, but also different cultures from the different parts of our states, the southern states, the Midwestern states, the city states. And then they went to overseas. And when they went overseas, completely different place. Like Tom Cabrera, one of the soldiers from my neighborhood, around the corner from O Street on N Street, he went to France, and he was introduced to the French culture. And some of our guys that lived in the projects went to Italy, and lo and behold, you know, when you have restaurant recreation, where do you go? Well, you meet girls, and some of them met those girls and married them and brought them back to South Colton. So that was one of the things that I think one of the positive things that happened, that it took our boys out of South Colton and introduced them to a different, not only vocational training, but also lifestyle and culture and language and everything
It
else.
opened their eyes.
It opened their eyes completely. So when they came back to Colton, Frank, they said, well, wait a minute. This is, we live in a segregated community, and that's not the way it is. We paid our dues. Therefore, we should be able to buy a house in North Colton. So that's when the movement started. In 1952 with Ralph Cervantes. Ralph wanted to buy a house near the junior high school, just south of the junior high school. And they said, no, you can't buy. Well, why not? You're Mexican, you can't buy the house. But he went to court, and he won his case, and he was the first one to buy a house in North Colton. And then along with, we interviewed in our Project Salayala, and he bought his house in 53, 54 also. He was a Navy person. And from then on, Frank, there was a construction boom that happened in the mid-50s. And we had new projects that were built in North Colton along Rancho Boulevard. Just, yeah.
Rancho Avenue?
Yeah,
Right.
Rancho Avenue.
Around the junior high, really.
Yes.
Which was originally the main agricultural area of Colton. And,
Right.
And the orange groves were chopped down and turned into houses.
Yeah, that area was known as the terrace area. So anyway, we had a lot of house building, so a lot of our veterans um, that not only fought in World War II, but also in the Korean conflict, because the Korean conflict was the early 50s, 51, 52, and they served their 2 years, came back in the mid-50s, and they were eligible to buy, with home loans, to buy housing. So many of them bought houses there on Rancho Boulevard. And then you had that big housing that was built north of Mill Street, huge housing area, and many of their veterans bought houses in that area. So that started the immigration, just going from South Colton to North Colton. So that was one of the positive areas that happened with World War II. The other one was, Norton Air Force Base was built in San Bernardino, established in San Bernardino because of the war effort. And that provided a lot of military materials to the different bases that we had overseas. So after the war, many of our veterans, Mexican veterans, got jobs at Norton Air Force Base. So that, again, part of the training that they got, and also some of the benefits that they needed to be able, as veterans, to get jobs in that area. And then in the late 30s, Frank, and the early 40s, Kaiser Steel developed, and Kaiser Steel needed to manufacture steel for the war effort. So a lot of jobs opened in that area, Frank. So I don't know, maybe war was good. And I tell people that the best affirmative action that happened was World War II.
Followed by the Korean conflict.
But more so the World War II, that the best affirmative action that happened, because our kids were brought out of the barrio. Our kids were provided with training, not only to be soldiers, but vocational training. And that also that war kind of, after our kids came back, it gave them a sense that I paid my dues. Therefore, should be treated as a full American and not as a Mexican American, but I should be given those rights as a veteran to be able to do those things. I should be able to buy a house wherever I want. I should be able to work wherever I want. And I should be able to raise my kids and give my kids a good education because I paid my dues. So I tell people, Frank, that was the best affirmative action program that developed. And people say, well, a lot of people were killed during that war. I said, yeah, but freedom is not free, and therefore, our community, our Mexican community, benefit from that war.
Definitely. Now, you graduated from high school what year?
1958.
And then what did you do after graduating?
I went to the community college for 2 years, transferred to Cal State Los Angeles, and I graduated in '62 from Cal State, 4 years after high school graduation.
Now, what made you were successful academically in high school?
That's the irony. It's a different story. When I went to high school, the bad experience at Colton Junior High School, the bad academic experience, and also personal experience. I went to high school and I was placed in remedial classes. Okay, the English, the math, some of those remedial classes. And then I had a friend, Omar Sosa. Omar's family was very pro-education, and he had older sisters that went through Colton High School, and they prepared themselves to go to a university. So when Omar was there, Omar was taking college prep courses. And Frank, I didn't know what college prep courses was. So I asked him, Omar, how come you're not taking the same class that we're taking? Well, I'm going to go to college, so I'm taking college prep courses. You're kidding. Are they different from what we're taking? Yes, they're very different. These are college prep courses. So Frank, I started my college prep my sophomore year rather than my freshman year. And I had to make up all those college prep courses, sophomore, junior, and senior. And that's what happened in my case in getting prepared for college. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, Valley and then Cal State Los Angeles. Graduated from Cal State 4 years after high school in '62. And then at that time, Frank, the draft was still in effect. They were drafting you into the service. And if your number came up.
That was the Vietnam War.
That was prior to Vietnam.
Okay.
That was still, Vietnam was mid-'60s, but this was 58, 58 through 62. Is still eligible for the draft. So if your number came up, you were drafted, but if you were in college, you'd get a deferment.
Right, a 2S deferment.
So I got 5 deferments, Frank.
Oh,
The fifth deferment, they didn't, the fifth deferment was me becoming a teacher. So I got a deferment, and I said I was gonna be a teacher, and so I got my teaching credential the fifth time. Now, so it was a good racket, Frank, so I thought, well, maybe I'll get the master's degree, and to get a deferment to get the master's degree in '63. And that didn't work, Frank. They said, no, you're not. You're coming into the Army. But at the same day that I got my notice into the Army, I was invited to go in the Peace Corps. So I went in the Peace Corps for a couple of years and finished my Peace Corps. I was going to stay in '65, and then after that got my master's at Cal State Los Angeles, and then got my doctorate degree in '73 from UCLA. Yeah, so that's the extent of my educational experience.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, you must have had some jobs while you were in high school. And then after high school, while you were getting your education, you must have had jobs. What kind of work did you do?
Well, I picked oranges. I picked berries. And just little things during the summer. One of my friends, Art Chavez, his mom organized a group of us to go pick berries in Bloomington. So we picked berries in Bloomington during the summer. And then I got a little older, 14 years old, and my dad thought it was a good idea for me to go pick oranges. And my uncle Alcadio, was an orange picker, and he said, "Yeah, I'll take you. You can work the bottom of the trees," and we were called ratas that we could get the bottom of the oranges at the bottom of the tree. So I did that with my uncle, and he taught me how to, cut the fruit from the tree, and how to carry a ladder, and how to, everything that I need to be a good orange picker. So I was a good orange picker. And then the following year, I was old enough to be able to do the orange picking by myself, and I didn't need my uncle. So I brought my little brother with me, and he was a rata, and we both worked together on that. And then after that, my friend Omar, I mentioned Omar Sosa, his father used to cut hair, so they had the hair clipping instruments, and my dad used to cut our hair, and we had the equipment also. So Omar said, well, if I cut your hair and you cut my hair, we won't charge each other. So we started cutting each other's hair, and then the neighborhood kids in my area found out that I cut hair. So I started cutting hair Saturday and Sunday, and I maybe cut 10 haircuts on weekends, and I charged 50 cents. So that was $5, right, that I would make on the weekends. So I did that for the 4 years that I was in high school. I cut hair for the 4 years that I was in high school. And then after that, after graduating from high school, I worked at the gas station, Henry's gas station. Worked there for 4 years. And
Where was that?
On La Cadena, between La Cadena and M and N Street, on the east side of the street. And I worked there for 4 years.
Is that building still there?
It's still there, it's still there. It's kind of a auto repair shop, but it's still there, still operating. Henry's no longer there. Henry retired a long time ago. But I worked there for 4 years, and that paid for my education, Valley College, Cal State, and yeah, for my 4 years of education. Well, I was working there. The last time I think I left the job in '62 when I was finishing up at Cal State Los Angeles. And then after that, Peace Corps, and then after that, teaching. So, and then the last 40 years I worked at Valley College for a couple of years as a counselor, and then I worked at Cal State for about 40 years. My title was Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies, and also part Assistant Professor of Education. So that's the extent of my work experience. And like I said, I just graduated, I'm just retired 3 years ago. And,
Now, a pretty important thing happened to you in the Peace Corps.
In the Peace Corps, Lily and I met at Cal State Los Angeles in '62. And then, like I said, I went in the Peace Corps. And then Lily also went in the Peace Corps. I went to Colombia, South America, and Lily went to Peru, South America. And after I was through in '65 with my mission, then I thought I could transfer to Peru and work there until Lily got through with her mission. But Peace Corps didn't think it was a good idea. So I said, well, let's get married. So we got married in South America, Colombia, South America, on June 13, 1965. And then we traveled through Central America, Mexico. And in Mexico, it was the first time that Lily had a travel in Mexico, and she discovered that what a wonderful culture, what a wonderful, history, what a wonderful everything about Mexico. So we became both very, very enlightened and very proud that we had our roots in the Mexican culture.
That's outstanding. Okay, now tell me a little bit about your community involvement and in social issues.
Well, the Peace Corps did a wonderful job in training me to do a lot of volunteer. So when Lily and I came back to Colton, we both got teaching positions with the Rialto Unified School District, and then we thought it'd be a good idea to start a scholarship. So we started a scholarship in Colton, and we did that for about 5 years. We collected funds. We had a fundraiser at the Vanaken home. They had a wonderful place for barbecues. So we started having our fundraisers there. And then from there, things just develop that you become involved in different activities in the community. So that's what happened to both of us. We became very, very involved with community activities. And then I ran for school board in 1978, and I was elected in 1978. But unfortunately, in '81, I got sick. I got the flu, and then the flu introduced the virus to the body, and the virus paralyzed me from the neck down, and I became a quadriplegic. But it still didn't stop me from being active in the community. In 80, I got out of the hospital in '83, and then I met some educators, led by Susan Vargas, and you were one of them, and Henry was one of them, and Bill Ellison was one of them, and you introduced me to a project called Future Leaders.
That you said was the best thing since frijoles and tortillas.
Yeah, that project was the best thing, tortillas and frijoles. And we started in 1984. Our purpose, we saw the high dropout rate that we had of our Latino kids in our community. The dropout rate was 54%. And then we looked at the college going rate, and the college going rate was only about 15% or 16%. So we thought, let's start a leadership program where we involved 8th and 9th grade students and teach them leadership skills, but also teach them to be actively involved in their high school and also take the A through G requirements that would prepare them for high school. We started with 96 kids in 1985, and then to date, Frank, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary, and we've had over 3,800 students that have come through our project. And the results of what you guys started was that we have done a survey of the kids that participate in our program, a 4-year service, 4 years after they've been with us, and we found that 99% of the kids that participate in our program graduate from high school versus the terrible dropout rate that we had back then of 54% for kids that don't participate in our project. And then the college going rate, Frank, for our kids that participate in our program is 90% versus the college going rate of maybe 20% now, 25% now. And then recently, we just had an election a couple of days ago, 2-3 days ago this week. And we've had 2 of our kids that we met in 1987, Raul Ruiz, Dr. Raul Ruiz. He was elected to Congress.
And the other one is in 1993?
And the other one was Pete Aguilar in 1993 that we met when he was an 8th grader, 9th grader. And he was also just elected to Congress. So Frank, the project works. You guys brought in a project that was, you're absolutely right.
We brought in a project.
That was
You're
the
part
best
of
thing
you're
is
part of the-
tortillas and frijoles, that it works. It works. And we know what makes it work, Frank. We know.
Now, that part of the reason for becoming involved in Future Leaders was the conference that was held here at Cal State San Bernardino to address the problems of the dropout rate. And I know our principal at Colton Junior High, Dale Chilson, participated in that. And so he and you started another project parallel with the beginning of Future Leaders.
But that was Project Upbeat. That's right. I
correct.
forgot.
Yes.
Upbeat, university participation.
Preparation.
Preparation begins with early academic training. And we started that. We got kids from the junior high school to come to Cal State, and then we would have little lectures for them and their parents when they came to Cal State. And Frank, I think that's still going on. I'm not sure.
It is.
I'm not sure.
I just got a request for some help with a flyer for
Uh-huh.
this year's Upbeat program at Colton Junior High.
Uh-huh.
So it's the 31st year for Project Upbeat.
Wow, wow.
Now, that also led to another program that you started for elementary school
Oh,
students.
the 4th grade project, the 4th grade project was in '86, I think.
I'm going to college too.
I'm going to college project, where we would work with the elementary schools, 4th graders, and we'd have a curriculum for them, a 6-7 week curriculum, where we had a little notebook that they were supposed to complete, and the notebook had topics like, what is college, and how much does it go to college, what can I do with a college education, and how do I prepare myself for college, and how much does it cost. So we did that, and it was just a great project. As a matter of fact, one of the moms I saw at Seder Brothers the other day, and she said, my son participated in your I'm Going to College project, and he's a senior this year at Cal State San Bernardino. So that was a wonderful little project.
And a number of Project Upbeat and I'm Going to College students ended up being in Future Leaders.
Yes.
Well, you've also been involved in other community groups and in various capacities. You've mentioned mental health, the Sheriff's Gang Task Force, and others.
The bilingual education, county bilingual education program, just a slew of different activities, not only community-based, but also kind of county-wide, Frank. So I've been very actively involved in many aspects.
What are you involved in right now?
Well, let's see.
You and Lily are both in LULAC?
Oh, we started a LULAC chapter here locally, and we're involved with LULAC. And you know, LULAC, League of United Latin American, what is it?
Citizens.
Citizens. And the idea is to provide social justice to our community, encourage voter registration and also voting, encourage education for our kids, and you know, just look at community issues that happen in our community. We're involved with that. Let's see what.
You're also on the water board, aren't you?
Oh, that's right. I'm on the state water board. We have 9 regions in California, and our Santa Ana region is number 8. And there's 7 of us on the commission. We were appointed by Governor Brown for that commission. So, and then Governor Gray Davis also appointed me to another commission, and that was the Disability Commission, State Committee for our area, and I was part of that. So it hasn't never stopped, Frank. It's always been one activity after another. I was contacted by one of our students from Colton Junior High School, Ted Housley, and Ted mentioned that he's writing a book on baseball, Little League in Colton. So he interviewed me, and you know, we got involved with that project too.
Well, as you've lived your life, there have been people who have influenced you greatly.
I think, first of all, Dad, my mom and Dad. Dad taught me, what do you call those, the work ethic. You know, the work ethic that you prepare to do whatever you're going to do, and you do it and until you finish doing whatever project you're
Your core
assigned.
values.
My core values, and also the fact that you're always prepared. Like he said, you always keep your tools clean, your shovel and your rake and your pick and whatever you use, you always keep it clean. And before you leave a job, you get it clean and get it ready for the next day. So Mom and Dad were very instrumental in my core values, as you mentioned, of the work ethic, you know. And then some of the other mentors that I had was, I mentioned Ray Abril, who was my Boy Scout Scoutmaster, and he also taught us those Boy Scout values of I forget what the 12 oath pledges are, but we worked. I still remember being clean, thrifty, kind. Anyway, those values that we taught. Be prepared, and some of those things that we did as Boy Scouts.
Now that's Ray Abril Sr.
That's Ray Abril Sr. That's Ray Abril Sr. He was a Scoutmaster, and also very influential because he would open up his house, his backyard, for us to be able to play basketball in the backyard, and also use the weight that he had. So we called it a little muscle gym. So that was that. The other is Henry Portillo, who owned the gas station, and again the honesty and providing good service and being friendly to your customers and providing the best service you could at the gas station. Another mentor was Ernie Garcia. He's been my mentor for almost 60 years now. I met him when I was just after high school, and he would always stop by the gas station and ask, "Are you in college? Are you doing your homework? Are you getting good grades?" The other The other mentors that I had were, let's see, Ernie and, who do I have here? I mentioned Don Jose Vasquez. Don Jose Vasquez worked at the gas station with me. An older guy, older gentleman. He was in his 80s when I met him. And he was retired and he opened up the gas station and provided the services in the morning. And very practical person. Like, at that point I had a 50 Chevy, and I would take some time while I was at the gas station when we were not busy, and I would be working on my car, and I would be waxing it and polishing it. And then Don Jose would come up to me and say, Tomasito, ¿qué estás haciendo? ¿Qué estás haciendo con ese carro? Asobi, massaging and massaging. Y de lámina no pasa. It doesn't go past the metal. So what are you doing wasting your time, massaging that piece of metal? It won't go beyond metal, so don't waste your time in that. The other thing that he would say, he said, Tomasito, you have to take care of your partner, because, some of your friends that you would meet in the bars and you would buy a round for them, and they will not be around when you need them. But your wife will be there when you need her. She'll take care of you. She'll, just take care of you with all needs that you have. So you cannot mistreat your wife. Yeah, but your friends are not your friends. They're only your friends when you're buying drinks for them. Yeah. So anyway, he would give us that. And then the other mentor that I had was Rex Dye. I met Rex at Cal State Los Angeles, and again, Rex kind of showed me how to be a student. Here I was at Cal State Los Angeles. I wanted to come home. I didn't have any friends there. Anyway, he talked me into getting involved in clubs at the campus. He taught me, the social graces, the table settings. He taught me the classical music, and he taught me how to identify classical music and be comfortable with that. He also would take me to different functions in the city, and we participated in some of those functions. He taught me to be comfortable in those functions. He wanted me to teach me how to drink martinis, Frank, but I never got the taste for martinis. They were not, never got the taste, never acquired the taste. And then my other mentor was Dr. Kent Monroe. He hired me here at Cal State San Bernardino, and he was just a terrific administrator. And we spent every day at 7 a.m. for at least a year, and he would teach me how to function at the university. He would teach me what relations needed to be developed at the university to be successful. He would teach me the governance of being an administrator. He would teach me how to interview and hire people. So I had a wonderful time with him, and then he would also be very supportive. He was number 2 on campus. We had the president, and we had him, and he would support whatever programs we had to service underrepresented students, and made sure that those programs were not placed out in right field, or they would be recognized as stepchild programs. He would say, no, they're part of our unit, and they're part of Rivera has the same status as not only our administrators and student services, and has the same title and position, but he's also part of the faculty. And being part of the faculty, you participate in faculty committees where decisions and policies are made. And he said, Rivera, if I will not give you tenure unless you get your terminal degree, which was a doctorate. And I was pretty close, I only had a few months to go. And he said, because to work at the university, you have to have the same credentials as the faculty has and everybody else that works there. Otherwise, you're not part of the team. So he made sure that I got that doctorate and was placed in positions of policy making where, you know, it made life easier for me and my department and everybody else that was working with me.
Just briefly, can you go back to Esther, Armenta, and Stella Castorena? Just
Those were my, Esther Armenta was my second grade teacher. Tremendous, wonderful influence on me.
that was at Garfield.
It was at Garfield, second grade, and I had never had a Mexican-American teacher. And when I saw her, I said, I'll be darned. I didn't know that Mexicans could be teachers. So she was a wonderful, wonderful role model for me. So I felt very, very good in her class. It was a wonderful year. And Stella Castorena was my sixth grade teacher. And again, you know, great teacher, creative teacher, smart teacher, pretty teacher, and a Mexican-American. And I said, I'll be darned. This is wonderful. So they were wonderful role models for me, Frank. And I think that's why I wanted to be a teacher. Or maybe because of Ernie Garcia, I wanted to be a teacher. So they were good role models for me.
And you were very fortunate.
I was fortunate.
Now, getting down to the present, we're working on the oral project. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came about?
It was your fault.
Blame it on me.
Yeah, it was your fault. You and Henry, for years and years, you've been talking about doing a history of South Colton. And we just didn't have time. You know, you were working, you were busy. And I was working and I was busy.
And we had future leaders.
And then we had future leaders, so we didn't have time. But you talked about it for many years. And then, what was it, a year ago, a little over a year ago, you and I, Henry, got together in my office here at Cal State. And we said, let's start it. Let's get started. And we started, we got together with the dean of the library, Mr. Cesar Caballero, and he thought it was a wonderful idea. So we started a year ago, and so far we've interviewed 35 people. And Frank, it's been the best experience for me in learning about the history of South Colton and growing up in South Colton. And so now we're still working on it, and we will continue working on it. So it's been a wonderful history lesson and also very insightful in terms of what our people, not only parents and grandparents, but also our neighbors, what they went through in living in a segregated community and not being able to participate in past the railroad tracks in the larger community. So it's been a great.
And then as the community evolved into a more integrated community.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And I think we will continue with the project. Like I said, it's I don't know how long we'll continue with the project, but it's good. It's been a great project.
And it's obvious from the glee that you take in interviewing people that you're enjoying yourself.
Have fun with it.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to bring up or mention?
Well, you know, I mentioned Todd Housley a few minutes ago, and Todd contacted me and interviewed me a couple of days ago, and it brought to light a different appreciation of living in Colton. In '52, we started the Little League in Colton. The Lions Club started the Little League in Colton.
And you were part of that.
And there were 4 teams that were established, that were developed, and I was one of the teams. I played for the Indians, and we had the Cubs, and we had the Giants, and I can't remember the last team, but Ted asked me, well, we had a lot of. He said we had a Colton started the team in '52, and in starting the team, we had a lot of kids from South Colton that participate. I said, no, Ted, we only had maybe 6 or 7 or 8 that participated in the 4 teams, and there were 13 of us in each team. So you multiplied 13 plus 4, and that's what, about 42 people that participated in those teams. And there were maybe 6 or 7 of us from South Colton that participated, because you look at the picture of the Indians, there's only 2 of us, myself and Joe Amador. But because of our grandparents and our parents' influence and being afraid of going to crossing the railroad tracks in North Colton, we didn't know what North Colton was about. And we only knew of the stories that our grandparents would tell us, that you're not wanted there, and you're not supposed to be past the railroad tracks. And then they would tell us about the policemen, if they got you, if you were downtown Colton, they would say, okay, Mexicans, you go back to where you belong. And that's what the attitude was. But Little League opened the door for us to be able to participate in an activity that you would try out on a Saturday, and then you were assigned to a team, and then that team was consisted of 13 different ball players. And in developing teams, Frank, we did not look at skin color, or we did not look at that you were from South Colton. Can you play second base? Are you good enough to play second base? And are you good enough to compete with everybody else? And we were, which gave us that, I guess, instill enough self-confidence, and and knowing that you could compete with everybody else, including the gringos on your team. So that was very, very exhilarating for me, that I was part of that team, and I was a valuable player on that team, and that people wanted me to play with them. So that was one of the experiences that I had in team building. The other was that, you were introduced to a foreign country, a foreign part of your town that you have never been involved with. And the people that started the Little League were the movers and shakers of Colton. The mayors and the bankers and the owners of businesses and the managers of the cement plant and all those people. And you were part of that development. And so we were introduced to that. And the other thing, Frank, was that the ball players in my team became good friends. We became very, very good friends. For example, we have Kenny Hubbs, who played shortstop for us, and I was on his team. And one of the great ball players that we have that came from Colton. And then our catcher was Mike Briggs, and I still keep in contact with Mike Briggs. Mike and that year that we were playing ball with him, invited us to his home in North Colton, and he had a nice new house, Frank. Living room and kitchen and bedrooms and everything else. And I had a very poor, house behind my grandparents. No comparison. But he invited us to a slumber party. Frank, I didn't know what a slumber party was. I had no idea what a slumber party was. So we went to the slumber party, and we had dinner and breakfast and had a wonderful time in the backyard. And then Mike took us to his church. My brother and I and Joe Amador took us to his church the next day. Mm-hmm. And it was a Pentecostal church, so we were Catholic, so we didn't know what the church was. So anyway, but we went to the church, and I guess the introduction to that part of town. And then I reciprocated, and I invited Mike and his little brother Jerry to come and do a slumber party at my house. In my house, no dirt road, and it was just a lot different.
It was as much of an eye-opener for them as it was for you.
So anyway, Mike spent the night with us, and went through those different activities that we go out during the day. And then years later, Frank, years later, just maybe 5 or 10 years ago, Mike said, you know, Tom, we had that slumber party at your house. Jerry and my brother Jerry and I went to your house. Man, was it hot at your house? So again, Mike, I think, again, Frank, I think those were wonderful experiences for me that I was able to walk 13 blocks to the ball field, make friends and play and have a wonderful time. And then when we were in high school, junior high school, we got together, and those were some of the friends that I had in junior high school. And then in high school, we played ball together, right? We had a great baseball team, you know, because we played in the same team when we were little leaguers. So we had a great team, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Good baseball team, good baseball team. So I think that was one of the best things that happened to me. When I was 12 years old, that Little League came into my life, and Little League introduced me and got me out of the barrio and exposed me to a different culture, a different people. And there was a wonderful, I think, cornerstone that was laid in my life that added to my foundation. So if I were to say that the best thing, what was one of the best things that happened in Colden, I think the Little League coming to us in '52 was one of the best things.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps it up.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for our interview this afternoon. So it worked out very well.
All right.